When Heavy D passed away in 2011, the world lost a man who had quietly shaped the sound and spirit of a generation. His influence reached far beyond music, touching the lives of artists, actors, and creators, including the cast of Living Single. Yet when his funeral came, almost none of them were there to acknowledge him and pay their last respects. What happened behind the scenes of Living Single that kept them away? The man behind the magic. When Living Single first hit television screens in the early 1990s, it became an instant cultural statement. It captured the pulse of young black professionals navigating friendships, love, and ambition in New York City. And the show's cool, confident energy was deeply influenced by the music and attitude of the hip-hop era, which Heavy D was a big part of. He was a bridge between hip-hop and Hollywood. Before his appearances on Living Single, he had already built a reputation as one of the most charismatic figures in music. He was the frontman of Heavy D and the Boys, known for hits like Now That We Found Love and Somebody for Me. But what made him truly stand out was how effortlessly he carried himself. He was confident but approachable, stylish but humble, and that personality translated perfectly to television. When he guest starred on Living Single, his presence added a genuine special connection that couldn't be scripted. His appearances grabbed the attention of audiences, especially because he embodied the world of the show perfectly. He knew the streets, the studio, and the spotlight. Heavy D's influence stretched beyond what viewers saw on camera. He was known for mentoring young artists and offering guidance in an industry that could be ruthless. That's right. The same man who had helped Sean "Diddy" Combs get his start at Uptown Records was also quietly motivating the cast of Living Single to expand their reach. He believed in the power of visibility, that seeing black faces on primetime television was just as revolutionary as hearing them on the radio. Producers respected him, the cast adored him, and his presence on set added a grounded kind of confidence, helping them strike that perfect balance between sharp comedy and cultural relevance. But while his public image radiated positivity and effortless charm, there were layers to Heavy D's story that few people knew. Away from the laughter and the cameras, he carried his own private battles, struggles that shaped how those close to him understood him. Heavy D's most visible personal challenge was his struggles with weight since the early years of his career. In fact, it became part of his brand, earning him the nickname the Overweight Lover, a title he embraced with humor and pride. He flipped what could have been a source of ridicule into something empowering, turning confidence into his trademark. Still, the constant talk about his size, the endless touring, and the pressure to stay relevant in an industry that worshipped image all took a toll. As his fame grew, so did the expectations. He had to balance music, acting, production work, and public appearances while trying to maintain a personal life that felt real. Those close to him would later share that Heavy wasn't the kind of celebrity who got lost in chaos. He didn't seek headlines or controversy. Instead, he retreated into moments of stillness. The spotlight was bright, but he often preferred the quiet corners of his home, away from the noise of the business. Even though he was rarely tied to any public scandals or feuds, Heavy D wasn't immune to the emotional strain that came with success. There were years when he quietly battled bouts of depression and fatigue, trying to manage the stress that came from always being camera ready. The same drive that made him a star sometimes felt like a trap, and the expectation to keep producing, performing, and smiling even when he needed a break became overwhelming. His cousin, producer Pete Rock, later described Heavy as someone who became increasingly spiritual in his later years. Music had given him a platform, but faith gave him peace. He began focusing more on gratitude, balance, and the legacy he wanted to leave behind. This mindset showed in the choices he made, the charity events he supported, the mentorship he offered, and the way he treated the people around him. He donated to children's programs, supported educational causes, and often showed up for people without any cameras around. Away from the public eye, Heavy's world revolved around his family. He had one daughter, Z. Myers, whom he adored. Fatherhood changed him, grounding him in a way that fame never could. He shared a long-term relationship with chef and restaurateur Antonia Lofaso, and together they built a life that was intentionally private. He wanted normalcy, dinners at home, laughter, and time with his daughter, because to him, those were the real rewards. By the late 2000s, Heavy had slimmed down, embraced a healthier lifestyle, and was more selective about his work. He seemed content, calmer, wiser, and ready for a quieter chapter. To the outside world, he looked like a man finally at peace. But in the months leading up to his death, there were signs that his body was struggling to keep up with his spirit, and subtle hints that something wasn't quite right. And just like that, Heavy D would leave fans and friends shocked, and a cast of people who loved him deeply, facing the heartbreak of saying goodbye far too soon. Heavy D's tragic passing and funeral. The news of Heavy D's passing hit like a shockwave. On November 8, 2011, fans around the world woke up to headlines they could hardly believe. Heavy D, the larger-than-life entertainer whose energy had defined an entire era of hip-hop, was gone at the age of 44. In Los Angeles that morning, he had just returned from a trip to Cardiff, Wales, where he'd performed at a tribute concert to Michael Jackson. It had been his first live television performance in years, a comeback moment that had everyone talking about how good he looked and how effortlessly he still owned the stage. But less than 2 weeks later, his body gave out in the most unexpected way. Heavy had reportedly been complaining of shortness of breath in the days leading up to his death. Some thought it was exhaustion from travel. Others assumed it was a lingering cold. That morning, as he stepped outside his Beverly Hills home, his breathing worsened. According to reports, neighbors saw him collapse and called for help immediately. Paramedics arrived and rushed him to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, but it was too late. The coroner later confirmed that the cause of death was a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot that had traveled from his leg to his lungs. It was sudden, silent, and devastating. The news spread fast across the entertainment industry. Social media filled with tributes from artists, actors, and fans who couldn't process the loss. For many, Heavy D wasn't just a performer. He was the person who had opened doors, offered guidance, and made everyone around him feel seen. His passing wasn't just the loss of a rapper or actor. It felt like losing one of the few people in the business who had never been tainted by ego or scandal. 10 days later, on November 18, 2011, his hometown of Mount Vernon, New York, became the gathering place for one of the most emotional farewells the music world had seen. The funeral was held at Grace Baptist Church, a place filled with both sorrow and celebration. It was standing room only. Fans lined the streets outside, holding photos, flowers, and farewell signs. Inside the church, celebrities sat side by side with lifelong friends from Mount Vernon. The pews were filled with faces that represented decades of Black entertainment history. Jay-Z, Will Smith, Jada Pinkett Smith, Usher, Mary J. Blige, Russell Simmons, and Queen Latifah all came to pay their respects. Many of them shared stories that painted a picture of a man who was kind to everyone, generous with his time, and always full of laughter. Diddy stood up and gave a heartfelt speech, crediting Heavy D for giving him his first real break in the music industry. He said that without Heavy's belief in him during his early Uptown Records days, there might never have been a Bad Boy Records. Reverend Al Sharpton read a personal message from President Barack Obama addressed to Heavy D's daughter, Zia Myers, expressing condolences and acknowledging her father's influence on music and culture. The letter called Heavy a dynamic performer who inspired a generation through his upbeat music and positive spirit. As Sharpton read the words aloud, there were tears across the room, not just for the man they lost, but for the kindness and optimism that seemed to die with him that day. The service was intimate, Despite the fame of those present, it wasn't about spectacle or star power, it was about love. Mary J. Blige, who had known Heavy since her early days at Uptown, sat quietly near the front, visibly emotional. Queen Latifah, the only present member of the Living Single cast, carried a quiet heaviness that day. She stood among the mourners with an expression that said more than any words could, a mix of sorrow and gratitude for someone who had been in her corner long before the fame took hold. She later described him as a big brother, someone who offered guidance and grounded advice when the industry's chaos threatened to pull her under. Fans watching from afar noticed how unguarded she seemed, breaking from her usual composure. The media captured that moment, calling it one of the most heartfelt tributes of the day, a reflection of the deep bond between two artists who had been there for each other. After the ceremony, the casket was carried out to a sea of cameras, but the mood remained respectful. Heavy D's body was laid to rest at Ferncliff Cemetery in nearby Hartsdale, the same resting place as other legends of entertainment. His daughter Zia, just 11 at the time, clung to her mother, surrounded by family and friends who promised to keep his legacy alive. But while the funeral brought together some of the biggest names in music and Hollywood, there were noticeable absences. Almost none of Heavy D's fellow cast members from Living Single were seen at the service. The same group of people he had supported, uplifted, and influenced during his time on the show didn't appear to be there to say goodbye. It left many wondering what really happened. Why didn't the cast of a show he had helped shape and had poured his time and heart into show up for him in the end? The answer to this question is tied to the relationship these cast members had with Heavy and the shocking incidents that went on behind the scenes of Living Single. Terrence Carson. Carson had been one of the cornerstones of Living Single. From the moment he appeared on screen as Kyle Barker, the charming, sharply dressed stockbroker with a razor wit and endless banter with Maxine Shaw, he became an essential part of what made the show click. His chemistry with Erika Alexander gave Living Single one of the best love-hate dynamics in 90s television. That electric blend of sarcasm, flirtation, and tension that audiences couldn't get enough of. But behind the scenes, Carson's experience on the show wasn't nearly as smooth as the character he played. For the first 4 seasons, he was a fixture on the show, but midway through production, things began to shift. He started noticing changes in how the show was being managed and how decisions were being made about storylines and character focus. As Living Single grew more popular, Carson felt that some of the original creative direction, particularly around how the black male characters were portrayed, was being watered down. According to him, the show was losing the balance that made it special. When he later spoke about it in interviews, Carson didn't shy away from explaining that his departure wasn't voluntary. He had been fired. The decision, he said, stemmed from ongoing tensions between him and the producers. He had voiced concerns about representation, arguing that the male characters were being pushed to the background and that certain creative choices didn't reflect the authentic tone the show had started with. To him, Living Single had always been about community, a reflection of educated, ambitious black men and women navigating life together. And he felt that image was being distorted for ratings. By season 4, those disagreements reached a breaking point. When the 5th season premiered, fans immediately noticed Kyle's absence. The show moved on with little explanation, and Carson only returned for the series finale, a gesture that seemed more symbolic than reconciliatory. For viewers, it was confusing, and for Carson, it was painful. He had poured years into building a character and a team dynamic, only to feel replaced and erased from something he had helped define. The impact of his exit went far beyond a contract dispute. The cast, once known for its tight chemistry, began to fracture. Some members stayed close, others quietly drifted apart. The emotional strain of losing a colleague who had been there from the start lingered. In later years, Carson spoke candidly about how the experience affected him personally and professionally. He described feeling isolated, misunderstood, and disappointed by how the situation was handled. During a recent podcast conversation with Erika Alexander, his former co-star and longtime friend, Carson reflected on the emotional toll of that period. He admitted that the way he was let go left scars not just on his career, but also on his relationships with people he had once considered family. There was hurt, but also acceptance. He acknowledged that everyone copes with change differently, and that time had given him perspective, even if it hadn't erased the sting. So, when Heavy D passed away in 2011 and his funeral brought together people from across the entertainment world, Carson's absence raised questions. But for those who understood his journey, it wasn't shocking. By then, he had distanced himself from Hollywood circles, choosing a quieter life centered on his music and theater work. It's entirely possible that grief hit him privately, away from cameras and press. But given the complicated history surrounding living single, which Heavy D had been a part of, attending the funeral might have reopened old wounds he'd long tried to heal. But Carson wasn't the only living single cast member carrying complicated feelings about the past or about how to face it in the public eye. Kim Fields. Kim Fields was one of those rare performers who could light up a scene without saying a word. Kim had already been a television veteran by the time she joined Living Single. She'd grown up in the spotlight, first becoming a household name as Tootie on The Facts of Life. But as Regine Hunter on Living Single, she brought sharp timing, confidence, and that unforgettable mix of sass and charm that made the show feel alive. Regine was unapologetically ambitious, obsessed with fashion, social status, and finding her version of success. But underneath all that attitude was warmth and vulnerability. Her chemistry with Erika Alexander's Maxine Shaw created some of the most memorable moments in sitcom history, their constant back and forth giving the show its edge. But by the later seasons, things began to shift behind the scenes. The energy that once made Living Single such a joy to work on had started to fade. In the early years, the cast had been close, a family, laughing and improvising between takes. Yet, as time went on, creative changes, scheduling pressures, and industry politics crept in, slowly changing the atmosphere. Kim, who had always been disciplined and deeply professional, started feeling the weight of it. She stayed with the show consistently through late season 5, continuing to deliver standout performances, but something was off. In a 2021 interview, Kim opened up for the first time about what that period was really like. She revealed that during the final season, she was emotionally and professionally shut down. The work that had once inspired her now felt heavy, and she described feeling drained, caught between personal challenges and the demands of a set that no longer felt as nurturing as it once did. At the time, she was going through a divorce and simultaneously trying to build something new, her own production company. That alone would be enough to stretch anyone thin, but for someone who had spent her life on camera, it was also about redefining who she wanted to be. Acting had always been central to her identity, but behind the scenes, she was craving creative control and a fresh start. By the last stretch of Living Single, that desire to move forward became impossible to ignore. When she left a few episodes before the series finale, fans were surprised. At the time, most people assumed it was a scheduling issue or a creative choice by the producers. But over the years, her silence spoke volumes. She didn't appear in the finale, and for a long time, she didn't take part in reunions, retrospectives, or nostalgia interviews. While other cast members reflected openly on their experiences, Kim kept her distance. That distance fueled speculation. Some wondered if there had been tension between her and the rest of the cast, especially since Living Single had a history of behind-the-scenes challenges. But it turns out, Kim needed space, and stepping back was an act of self-preservation. Erika Alexander and Queen Latifah would later acknowledge that not all cast relationships stayed close after the show ended. And in Kim's case, that separation seemed even more pronounced. So when news broke about Heavy D's passing in 2011, she was far removed from the entertainment circles she once shared with her former co-stars. Her absence from the funeral fit the pattern of her quiet withdrawal, not necessarily from a lack of respect, but because she'd left that chapter behind years earlier. But Kim wasn't the only cast member navigating private struggles and complex emotions during that period. Another actress from the show, known for her vibrant energy and strong connection to Heavy D himself, had her own reasons for stepping back when tragedy struck. Kim Coles. Coles brought a rare, pure-hearted joy that made every scene of Living Single brighter. As Sinclair James Jones, she was the quirky receptionist at Flavor magazine, always full of optimism, warmth, and an almost childlike sincerity that made her instantly lovable. Her romance with Overton Wakefield Jones, played by John Henton, became one of the show's most endearing storylines. And by season 5, when the couple finally married, it felt like a payoff. Not only for the characters, but also for the audience who had watched their relationship evolve from awkward crushes to genuine partnership. Coles stayed with Living Single all the way to its final episode in 1998. But after the cameras stopped rolling, her career hit an unexpected lull. The industry she had worked in for years suddenly felt quieter. Roles became less frequent, and the kind of success she'd once enjoyed seemed to drift further away. She spoke candidly years later about how hard that transition from being part of a beloved show to facing professional uncertainty left her struggling to find her footing. She went through financial hardship, but the most difficult part, she revealed, wasn't the money. It was the emotional crash that came afterward. For someone whose personality radiated positivity, facing depression felt foreign and disorienting. Kim later said that during that time, she had to learn how to love herself again without the validation of fame or steady work. This process was slow, but it transformed her. Once she recovered, Kim reinvented herself as a motivational speaker and author, using her platform to talk about resilience, faith, and mental health. She began hosting workshops on self-love and self-worth, often speaking directly to women who felt overlooked or defeated. In interviews years later, Kim reflected fondly on Living Single but acknowledged the distance between the cast members. Life pulled everyone in different directions, and for a long time, there wasn't much communication between them. She missed the camaraderie, but she also understood that distance didn't always mean disconnection. Sometimes people just needed to grow separately. When the show's early reunions and retrospectives began circulating in the 2020s, Kim wasn't part of them. She stayed relatively quiet, focused on her speaking engagements and personal growth. And when Heavy D passed, Kim Coles didn't make a public statement, and she wasn't seen at the funeral. But to those who followed her career closely, that didn't come as a surprise. She had long stepped back from the Hollywood spotlight and was focused on personal healing and self-discovery. But there was another cast member whose connection to Heavy D ran deeper than most. A woman whose passion for authenticity, creative independence, and truth made her both beloved and misunderstood in equal measure. Erika Alexander. Erika was the fire at the center of Living Single. As Maxine Shaw, the quick-tongued, fiercely intelligent attorney, she brought a spark that defined the show's attitude. Maxine wasn't just funny. She was fearless, sharp, and unapologetically herself. Her sarcasm, intellect, and feminist edge made her stand out in a sitcom landscape that often softened women for laughs. Erika played her with precision, blending humor with heart, and audiences connected instantly. Her performance earned her multiple awards and recognition that solidified her place on the show. Outside the show, Erika became one of its most passionate defenders. In interviews over the years, she often spoke about Living Single's legacy, how it broke ground for Black representation on television, and influenced the direction of ensemble comedies that came after. In 2020, when Friends actor David Schwimmer publicly mentioned that he'd like to see a reboot of Friends with an all-black cast, Erika responded pointedly, reminding the world that Living Single had done exactly that, long before Friends even aired. In the years since, she has continued to champion the show's history. In 2025, Erika teamed up with Kim Coles to launch the Reliving Single podcast, a warm and introspective series that revisited their time on set. Through candid conversations, they peeled back the curtain on what made the show special and what challenges it faced behind the scenes. But Erika also spoke openly about the inequities that shaped her experience. In a conversation, she discussed how Living Single was often treated differently by network executives compared to similar sitcoms led by white casts. She pointed out that despite strong ratings and cultural influence, the show didn't receive the same level of promotion or syndication support. It was a quiet reminder of how systemic bias in entertainment shaped which stories were elevated and which were left behind. When Heavy D passed, there was no public statement from Erika Alexander, and she wasn't among those seen at the funeral. It's unclear whether her absence was due to scheduling, distance, or personal reasons, but like several of her co-stars, there's the possibility that she already moved on from the Living Single era, the only thing still connecting her to Heavy D John Henton. John's presence on Living Single was defined by warmth and quiet charm. As Overton Wakefield Jones, the lovable building handyman with an easy smile and an even easier heart, he brought balance to the show's fast-paced humor and confident personalities. For John Henton, Living Single was a turning point. Before landing the role, he had been making his way through the stand-up comedy circuit, known for his easygoing delivery and observational humor. His appearance on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno proved life-changing, a standout set that caught the attention of producers and led directly to his casting as Overton. When the series ended, Henton continued working steadily in comedy and television. He appeared in The Hughleys and made guest appearances on several sitcoms, maintaining a presence that was both familiar and understated. But in 2000, tragedy struck. Henton was involved in a near-fatal car accident that left him with severe facial injuries and multiple fractures. The recovery was long and difficult, requiring reconstructive surgery and rehabilitation. When he eventually returned to public life, fans were quick to note the physical changes, but what stood out more was his resilience and quiet determination to rebuild without spectacle or self-pity. After the accident, Henton's public appearances became rare. He returned to stand-up comedy, but largely withdrew from Hollywood's spotlight. He avoided interviews, rarely attended industry events, and seemed to prefer the peace of private life over the constant visibility that fame demanded. His absence from early Living Single reunions and retrospectives fueled speculation among fans. Some wondered whether his retreat reflected strained relationships, while others believed it simply mirrored his naturally reserved nature. When Heavy D passed, Henton was not seen at the funeral, and no public statement from him surfaced, consistent with his quiet withdrawal from public events. Behind the laughter that defined Living Single, its cast members each lived complex, private lives, marked by triumphs and turning points that unfolded far away from the cameras that once made them icons. Do you think there's a deeper reason the cast stayed away? Drop your answers in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen. Like this video and subscribe to our channel for more updates.